Hello and welcome to the Eclectic Kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make a delicious sourdough rye bread along with some tips on how to customize it to fit your flavor preferences and your schedule. Let's start with the starter. Here I have 200 grams of plain white flour starter that I feed once a week. Since my starter has already passed its peak stage but is still nice and bubbly, I'm going to use 100 grams to make a levain and simply feed and refrigerate the remaining starter. To make the levain, mix 100 ml of room temperature water, 100 grams of sourdough starter and 100 grams of whole wheat bread flour. Mix everything together until you get a uniform mass and no dry bits of flour remain. I prefer making it in a measuring cup since it usually ends up around the 250 ml mark and I don't have to eyeball it with a rubber band. Cover with plastic wrap and let sit in a warm place until the volume doubles or comes up to around 500 ml. I usually do this step early in the morning, but you can use cold water to slow down fermentation and leave it to rise overnight. Once the levain has risen, it's time to mix the dough. In a mixing bowl, add the active levain and 80 ml of water. Stir until combined, then add 250 grams of bread flour and mix on low until a smooth, homogeneous dough forms. At the start it's going to look a bit dry, but don't worry, in a few minutes it'll come together. Cover and set aside for 1 hour to ferment or lees. This step helps the flour absorb water and kickstarts fermentation. While the dough is resting, let's make the Rye Scald. Start by mixing 100 grams of rye flour and 15 grams of cocoa powder. Pour over 130 ml of boiling water and mix with a spoon until it forms a thick paste. You can omit the cocoa if you want a slightly lighter loaf or replace it with about 7 grams of caraway seeds if you prefer a more deli-style rye flavor. It's going to be fairly sticky with a Play-Doh-like consistency. Cover with plastic wrap and set aside. After an hour, add the Rye Scald to the base dough. Although it's not strictly necessary, I like to fold the dough over the Rye Scald first so it doesn't flop around in the mixer. If you're making this by hand, also use this folding method to mix in the rye. Then add 12 grams of salt and 20 ml of water. I also dissolved a teaspoon of malt syrup in the water, but you can use sugar instead or omit the sweetener altogether. Start the mixer on very low speed until the dough absorbs the water, as this step can be a bit messy. Then continue mixing on medium speed, occasionally stopping to scrape down the sides and bottom until no white streaks remain, and the dough pulls away from the bowl. It'll still be sticky, but large pieces of dough shouldn't cling to your fingers. Using a wet hand, transfer the dough to a lightly oiled proofing bowl. Cover and let rest for 30 minutes. Now it's time for the first set of stretches. Grab the edge of the dough, stretch it gently and fold it over to the opposite side. Turn the bowl 90 degrees and repeat until you've completed 4 stretches. Always keep your hand wet to prevent sticking. Next, turn the dough over and give it a few slap and folds. Pick up the dough, let it stretch slightly, then slap it down and fold it over itself. Repeat until it forms a smooth ball. This usually takes around 6 to 8 slaps. Cover and let rest for 30 minutes. For the next set of stretches, I'll just be using the slap and fold method. As the gluten develops, you'll notice the dough becoming tighter and slightly less sticky. Repeat the stretches every 30 minutes for a total of 4 sets. For the final stretch, I simply gently lift the dough and fold it over a few times. Now cover and let the dough rise until it increases in volume by about 70%. This usually takes 2 to 3 hours depending on room temperature, starter strength and other factors. Let's prepare the proofing bowl. I don't have a Benetton, so I'm using a small glass salad bowl lined with a kitchen towel and dusted with a mixture of cornstarch and flour. This helps prevent the dough from sticking. To shape the bread, place the dough smooth side down on a floured surface and gently press it into a rough rectangle. Pull the sides toward the center, working your way around until it forms a ball. Turn the dough seam side down and with slightly cupped hands gently rotate it to tighten the surface. Add a bit more flour to your hands if needed. You should end up with a ball of dough that has a tight, smooth top. Transfer the dough seam side up to the prepared bowl, cover and refrigerate overnight or for about 8 to 12 hours. If preparing a same day loaf, leave the dough to rise for about 2 hours. The next morning, take the dough out and let it warm up for about 20 minutes and start preheating the oven. My oven has a steam function, but you can use a small pan or water on the bottom rack or simply mist the bread generously before baking. I also preheat an upside down heavy baking pan to get a browner bottom. Set the oven to 230 Celsius and let it fully preheat. Transferring the dough onto baking paper makes it easier to slide onto the hot pan later. I'll also dust the dough to get that classic white top. Now for the scoring. I was aiming for a wheat stalk and diamond pattern, but I ended up with alien scribblings instead. Still, the lower cuts turned out nicely. Carefully transfer the bread into the preheated oven and bake at 230 Celsius for 20 minutes. Then lower the temperature to 210 Celsius and bake for another 15 minutes. Turn off the oven and leave the bread inside with the door slightly ajar for another 10 minutes. This helps set the crust. And you're almost done. Just one final and hardest step remains. Let the bread cool completely before slicing and enjoying. And that's it. Soft on the inside with a slight bitterness from the cocoa and deliciously crunchy crust. Enjoy it with peanut butter and chocolate spreads or pair it with savory pâtés. This bread is sure to satisfy. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and consider subscribing for more delicious recipes. Bon appétit!